I am the face of change.
I believe I can shift our sector from the inside out
and give everyone the chance to succeed.
I am not just my disability.
I am not just my gender,
my sexuality,
or my skin colour.
I am a new perspective. I am changing minds.
I am making fundraising excellent, but I can't do it alone.
It will take all of us. We must stand together. We must stand strong.
We are a force for change.
We are the Change Collective.
You're listening to Simon Scriver's amazingly ultimate fundraising superstar podcast, talking all things fundraising, charities, non-profits, and more. Here's your host, as always, Simon Scriver.
Diversity is obviously a hot topic today in fundraising. It seems to be everywhere. If you've gone into a conference recently, you're going to see more and more people talking about it in sessions, which is obviously a good thing. You hear people talking about starting the conversation, which is perhaps an overused phrase. You know, surely we started the conversation a long time ago. It's hard for me to talk about as obviously a white male. I am stale, pale, male, and frail. I am all of these things. I am an extremely privileged person. And so fortunately, I have someone here today who knows a lot more than me, someone who I feel comfortable asking a lot of stupid questions to. And so I will probably be asking many stupid questions and putting my foot in it many times today. But I'm very, very grateful to have Jonathan Levy with me today. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Simon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's great to have you. You're a very big wheel in the fundraising sector, considering you're what, only 27?
That's correct. I've never been described as that before, but I'm certainly 27. I feel a lot older, but I'm 27. Yeah.
Do you? Yeah. Well, not to patronize your age or anything, but I look at some of your achievements. You're a trustee sitting on the Dyspraxia Foundation. Your management position in a face-to-face agency. You've got some volunteer experience. You're all over the place.
I am. One thing's led to another. I'm someone who, whatever I take on in life, I seem to throw myself into things. I'm thinking about the next thing, and okay. I've gained so much from working in fundraising.
Okay, and what's been the kind of main focus this year? What's new for you this year?
So this year, one thing, I've had the privilege of joining the Institute Fundraising Convention Board. Lots of people have heard of Fundraising Convention, Europe's largest fundraising conference. Mm-hmm. And this year, after this year's event, they made a point of attracting new board members. And I, perhaps like many people, I thought, oh, should I apply? Shouldn't I apply? Sure. I went on a website. I looked at all the board members, Oxfam, various other national large household names. Truthfully, I honestly didn't think I stood much of a chance.
Yeah.
I did recognise the fact that they were particularly pushing people with a difference, whether it be race, sexuality, gender, well, not gender, disability.
Yeah.
And as a disabled person myself, I thought I'd take a chance, I'd apply, recognizing I'd also actually think I was a credible fundraiser.
Yeah.
So I applied, and I was fortunate enough to get on. That started, our first meeting was in September. And again, it's been really insightful, not just in terms of how fundraising convention works or preparation planning involved, how seriously every application is considered, but also actually me being in a room with all these massively, far more experienced and senior fundraisers than myself. I'm probably actually, and not just beating myself down, but I'm probably the least experienced fundraiser. I've worked in there for 5 years, only got my first management title this year. I'm pleased to be on that board. And I'm there as someone who has a disability, but at the heart of it, as our wonderful chair, regular contributor to your show, Joe Jenkins, said, all of us who were selected, actually, at the heart of it, were chosen for our contribution to the sector and, really loving and having a great passion for what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you well deserve to be on there, and I'm happy to see you on there as a face-to-face representative, but also someone who has a background in politics and someone who has a wide range of experience. But yes, unfortunately, we do, well, fortunately or unfortunately, we keep coming back to this idea that you've said you have a disability, and whether or not it's played a part in you getting that role, it's obviously an integral part because I guess what are you seen as a voice now of people with disabilities on the board?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've also, as we're going to talk about, I've also recently had the pleasure of being featured in Institute Fundraising hashtag. The hashtag's very important. Hashtag Change Collective
Mm.
short film, which in it, obviously, it was scripted in partnership with a good agency. But in
Yeah.
it, I make rather grand statements like, "I am the face of change. I'm a fresh perspective." I don't ordinarily describe myself as those things, but
Yeah.
I suppose in terms of joining a board, speaking to people like you, I'm someone who many people perhaps haven't come across before. So in that respect, I might be a fresh perspective, I suppose. But I forgot your question now. But yeah, I'm really pleased to be on that board in that respect.
Yeah, well,
And
it's nice
actually,
to be the face of
having a
something.
stronger voice in the community too is really important for me.
Can I ask about your disability? You have
Yep.
dyslexia, is that correct?
Yep.
And
Maximum.
how if someone was an idiot and didn't know anything about that, that's how I ask a question when I don't want to admit that I'm the idiot. What is dyspraxia?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not dyslexia, and I make that point because I'm quite open about having dyspraxia for various reasons, as well as promoting Dyspraxia Foundation, which I serve as a trustee. And even people who've known me for a while, sometimes if I tell them about Dyspraxia Foundation, they might say, "Do you mean dyslexia?" Which is incredible. But dyspraxia, in simple terms, is in the middle of autism and dyslexia. But dyspraxia is more my fine and gross motor skills. It can affect people in so many different ways. So many people struggle socially, hence the link with autism. In my case, I can't drive mainly due to dyspraxia. That massively disadvantages me as far as many jobs are concerned, especially in fundraising.
Sure.
Things like cooking, cleaning, even carrying hot drinks, that kind of thing can be a nightmare.
Okay.
My first job, as you touched on, before working in the charity sector, I worked in politics.
Mhm.
And I worked for a member of parliament, and often members of parliament, other people say they're lazy, most of them aren't, most of them work exceptionally hard.
Mhm.
And so part of my job would be writing hundreds of letters every week. And I've come the Friday, you print off the letters for the MP to sign. And I make this point because even for me, printing these letters, if a printer got stuck, a state of the art printer, diagram of how to fix it, and this would not make sense to me. And the reason is, in a way, dyspraxia is like too many cross wires in the brain. The messages don't necessarily translate.
Mhm.
Likewise, I know where I live, but if you ask me to give verbal directions to it, I really struggle with that. One thing I'll say about dyspraxia briefly is you meet, as one of our trustees often says, it's a brilliant phrase in my opinion, you meet one person with dyspraxia, you've met one person with dyspraxia. And it just so happens
Mm.
we, like many charities, have an awareness week. We had Dyspraxia Awareness Week in October this year.
Okay.
And really, I must thank the BBC for this. The new series of Doctor Who started. I personally don't care about Doctor Who. I find it incredibly boring, but that's off a record. But the BBC decided to include a new character who, one, is BAME, which is good, but two, he has dyspraxia. And I've been involved in the Dyspraxia Foundation for 5.5 years. And that, for me, actually feels like one of the most significant things because now dyspraxia is reaching a mainstream
Okay.
audience. And this character in the first episode, just one thing about dyspraxia, it was shown him trying, he was 20, he's 19 in the show, and he's shown trying to ride a bike and he keeps falling off. And
Mhm.
just towards the end of the first episode, Bradley Walsh, his stepdad or something like that, he goes, "Oh, yeah, you're doing it now," and it looks like he's going to successfully ride a bike. And then he falls off. The reason I make that point
Mm.
is there's often perception in TV and in media of you have a condition, by the end of the episode, 60 minutes later, you're cured. You can't be cured from something like dyspraxia.
Oh, interesting. So, I mean, that's a big part of, I guess, tackling diversity is like you said, bringing it into the mainstream so people see it as a commonplace. I mean, I know my son, when we watch children's programs on TV, which is quite rare, he's more of a YouTuber. But on, I think it's BBC, one of the presenters now only has one arm
Yeah.
or only has one hand, and so for that to actually see it every day, it becomes kind of commonplace, and that becomes a lot more manageable as people grow up, I guess, that it is in the mainstream.
Yeah, and I think having those conversations, particularly at an early age, is really important for any kind of difference. My first job in fundraising, and I actually created a business case. I thought to myself, I applied for a few jobs, and although I had lots of voluntary experience for different causes, I thought I was instantly going to come across the, oh, you don't have paid experience kind of thing. And so at the time, I didn't really think much of this, but as I look back, it was quite a, I suppose, different thing to do. I created a business case and I pitched to a couple of local organisations near to me in Warrington. And one of them, the chief executive, replied back within 24 hours. As it just so happened, I knew nothing about this cause, but this cause is a conflict resolution cause, the Tim Parry Jonathan Ball Peace Foundation, set up by the parents of Tim Parry Jonathan Ball, who were killed in the 1993 IRA Warrington bombing. And that charity essentially is nowadays more relevant than ever before, because of course it's tackling things, it's tackling things we're seeing in the news on a daily basis, conflict resolution, working with all kinds of different people. And one of their projects is called Holding Difficult Conversations. And that's all about in things like a perpetrator, coming into contact, with a victim, that kind of thing, holding these difficult conversations, or even in schools, got a program, project in schools, going into schools, talking about these, in some cases, taboo subjects, Islam, other kinds of things, really having those conversations at an early age, because as people increasingly say nowadays, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, that's really mad. Like, there's just like so much going on, and it's great to see people talking about it more, although sometimes it feels like there's more conflict in the world than ever. I'm not sure there is, but at least the conflict that's happening, maybe it's more vocal, we're talking about it more, and that's how we address it, I guess. But we digress. In terms of the IOF, the IOF have clearly made a decision to become more diverse, or at least attack this idea of lack of diversity.
In the disability world, there's often a great debate about should you disclose when applying for jobs, that kind of thing.
Of course, yeah.
Legally, if you don't disclose in the application process, then something happens later on in the job, and you then reveal it, you can be sacked. But there's quite a lot of people and so-called experts in the disability world who don't go with that advice, for the fact that it does statistically overwhelmingly make it much more difficult to gain employment. Myself, because I learned so much in my first job in politics, as mentioned earlier, and in terms of my employer, understanding, being receptive to my disability was quite a negative experience. I made a point when I pitched to the Peace Foundation, the chief executive, I actually put a newspaper article I'd written in front of him. So not just me talking about it, but he could see something written down. Then when I joined a few weeks later, we had a fortnightly team meeting, and amongst the other, around about the time, 10 to 15 staff, this newspaper piece was put around them. It's quite a simple thing, really, but actually it's a really powerful thing, because words, the written form, for whatever reason, can have much more powerful effect than the verbal form. I'm not saying everyone should write a newspaper feature, but in my case, that worked really well. And being open about it from day one, even before I joined, meant that staff was genuinely so interested in me, willing to help me. But although I was, in theory, the only employee with a disability, I wasn't the disabled employee. I was taken, I felt credible. And just one thing from my experience, people often use the word inspirational for disabled people. And that's nice. But for me, it's always been much more important to be credible. And I've always felt, and the statistics have showed this for BAME, people in our sector as well, I've always felt I've had to work harder, to get where I am. And I got my first management role this year, and that was actually quite a big step for me in that respect, because I'm openly an aspiring charity leader.
Yeah.
But statistics overwhelmingly show it's much more difficult for you in that respect. And just on the point I made a moment ago about having to work harder, there's actually been a survey released today in a national newspaper. This is separate to the IOF works, but it's very relevant. And this survey interviewed more than 1,000 people, and it says 57% of minorities felt they had to work hard to succeed in Britain because of their ethnicity. That's talking about ethnicity, but that's still a staggering figure.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. Like, I remember there was something going around the internet before where a woman had applied for a job and she submitted the same CV twice. And one was under her name, her normal name, which is, very clearly not a British name or not an American name. I can't remember what country it was in, but not a white name. And then she did it under a fake name, which was a generic white person's name. And she never heard back from one of them, and then from the whiter name, she got called for an interview. So I'm not surprised, and I think anyone would be naive to say that there's this people aren't discriminated against in the job interview process and in every step of your career progression. Have you felt that? I mean, like you said, yours isn't as visible, you're still a white male, but have you felt that beyond the lack of being able to drive and things like that? Have you felt discriminated against?
Yeah. To some extent, I have. And actually, I'm always someone who's maybe sometimes by detriment, but I always try and see positive things. I'm constantly thinking about can do culture rather than can't. Actually, this time last year in the workplace, I say work, I'm often field based, in my job, face-to-face fundraising, there was
Yeah.
one colleague who actually he was making a joke which he thought was funny. It was actually mocking. And it was actually mocking. Part of my disability, dyspraxia, is often exaggerating arm movements. Now, in
Okay.
face to face, especially because you've got a really short period of time, you're right in front of someone, you've got
Yeah.
to be really, especially careful of arm movements. But nevertheless, mine sometimes kind of fly about uncontrollably. And he was calling me a name based on this. I asked him to stop repeatedly, and this guy was senior to me. And he basically responded really bluntly, well, as a salesperson, you're just lucky to have a job, so just get on with your work. Now, that's rare. Most people aren't like that.
Yeah.
A lot of this discrimination actually is unconscious bias. It's
Yeah.
important to make that point. But that was quite shocking for me in that respect. And I powered on, didn't particularly affect me, but it shocked me in that way. So I have experienced discrimination in that way, unfortunately. But as I mentioned, a lot of discrimination is actually unconscious, and
Yeah.
again, that's the thing. And again, changing attitudes in that respect, openly talking about these things, I think is so important in that respect.
Yeah, well, we've been raised. I mean, although I'm what am I, 10 years older than you? I mean, we've both been raised in a discriminatory world, and it's hard to shake those biases, those unconscious biases. And I think, even though we're the caring sector, those unconscious biases are rife. I'm sure I own lots of them, and I'm sure I've put them into practice without knowing it. And I guess that's where this IOF change collective is coming from. It's trying to attack not only those things that are front and center, but because we're a caring sector, I'd say it's a lot of it is unconscious, and they're trying to change those. So what is this hashtag change collective? How does it actually work? Is it just another one of these catchy phrases and words, or is it actually going to do something?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this Change Collective is a nice glossy video, which goes with the campaign of the launch of a manifesto for change. The Manifesto for Change, basically, the IOF Institute of Fundraising has over several years undertaken lots of research, into diversity in our sector, that kind of thing. And it's well known now, well proven statistically, for whatever reason, the fundraising profession is less diverse than the charity sector as a whole, and also far less diverse than UK society. And of course, naturally and genuinely, an equal, diverse, and inclusive fundraising community is integral to delivering excellent fundraising. And we're not just saying that, to try and sound nice and equal. There's a legal, moral, and business case for having a diverse workforce and more equal and inclusive culture. And of course, that genuinely will and can deliver better outcomes for fundraising and excellence in practice, because fundraisers at the moment are overwhelmingly women, white, and middle class. In the Change Collective video, which is only about 90 seconds long, there's a few figures in it, powerful figures, and one of them is 91% of the fundraising sector is white. So, the other 9% is not white. And that, for me, is shocking. I thought maybe it might be about 70% of the fundraising sector being white, but 91% is shocking, really.
And that's clearly disproportionate compared to what the population is. There's a disproportion there. I mean, it's not is 91% of the UK white? I have no idea. but
I don't think it's that high, no.
that seems tiny, and the figures are sometimes a bit. I mean, they're skewed. I mean, you talked about that that the majority of fundraisers are women, and you could almost on a gut reaction say, oh, well, that's great, isn't it, that the majority are women? But what's the twist on that?
Yeah, twist is women statistically aren't it. Majority of them statistically don't tend to get the higher jobs.
Yeah.
CEOs. Again, as a figure, about 60% of charity chief executives and trustees are us in that respect.
Yeah, and it's and speakers as well. I mean, you and I, we're both kind of convention junkies, and you see at that it's mainly white male speakers, people who look a bit like me, not as handsome as me, obviously, but people who look like me. And I've had this conversation recently with other white men that it's becoming harder for white men to get a place to speak at a conference. And it's funny because our initial reaction, and I'll say this, at risk of being mocked, but it's like, oh, that's not fair. We're suddenly finding it more difficult to get a speaking spot. And it's like, no, you're actually just kind of the field is being leveled a little bit, and this is the challenge everyone else is facing, and we still find it easier, but we're feeling a little hurt that suddenly it's becoming a little bit more challenging for us.
Absolutely, and one of the ways a manifesto for change has come about recently is the IOF early this year formed an equality, diversity, and inclusion panel. And I find sometimes people are actually quite ignorant about the words equality and diversity, these kind of things. But this panel, I'm not naming them, but I know someone on this panel who told me she got on it because basically she went to one of the IOF's various conferences, and she was appalled that they had a panel that was all males. And I think she tweeted about it in outrage afterwards, and she was obviously taken seriously. And since then, I believe I've been told during for the convention, all that, all male panels have been banned. And that's absolutely right. So this lady, tweeted her outrage, and she's had a positive impact in that respect.
Because she's been loud and kicked up a fuss about it. But people, usually younger people and people who are maybe in the early days of their career, they don't kick up that fuss because the consequences are too high for them.
Absolutely, that's the thing. But we really have to shift the sector from the inside out. And genuinely, everyone in our sector, regardless of your seniority or your job title, I believe has a role to play in taking up this challenge and taking action to address the inequalities. Obviously, it's the decision makers, often be those who are hiring and all that, who really can play significant roles in addressing the inequalities, but everyone can play their part, even talking about this, using a hashtag Change Collective. And we want IOF want as many organizations as possible, to sign up to supporting this manifesto for change. There's also currently a survey, which again, we really want people to take part in, because it's going to help us to benchmark the progress being made over the next 10 years in this respect. This video and this launch of a manifesto for change, we're not just patting ourselves on the back saying, yeah, we've done it, we've talked about it now. This is just the start of the journey. And I think sometimes that's a problem in society as a whole. These kind of exercises can just be tick box exercises, but no, it's the start of our journey, holding these conversations, making fundraise convention, making other things far much more of a hot topic. And something I've talked about repeatedly is, say at fundraising convention, for example, obviously I'm a disabled person, and not just Paralympians are wonderful, but not just having, say, Paralympians or famous people, talking as the disabled people there, not in any way disrespectful to them. Actually, having these people with difference, whether it be a sexuality, BAME, disability, actually having them on key sessions, talking about, the key fundraising topics, that kind of thing, not just being there as the token person talking about having a difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said it before, that word inspirational, and it's like, as a person with a disability, I'm assuming again, and people, who are minorities, it's like you have to go to the fucking South Pole to get noticed or to get on stage. but actually, you're an expert on face-to-face, you're a trustee, you're a volunteer, you have all this experience coming in. It's like, why aren't we opening the door for that platform, as opposed to, that you have to be inspirational as opposed to just talented at your job?
Exactly. And just one thing I'll say on that note, as you touched on earlier, I'm a trustee of the Dyspraxia Foundation. And as we've talked about, I've got dyspraxia myself. Now, people I've come into contact with, some people in my time in fundraising, I've heard it said, but even outside of fundraising, I've heard it said that you should never have beneficiaries on your board, that kind of thing. Now, in reality, I'm not necessarily a beneficiary of Dyspraxia Foundation because, truth be told, until I'd wrote a newspaper article 7 years ago, I'd never even heard of them, but that's my ignorance because I wasn't really interested in that point about finding out more.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I've got dyspraxia, and everything the Dyspraxia Foundation talks about is relevant to me. I live dyspraxia every day. I'm affected by it every day. But some people have a view that you should never have, these kind of people on boards, which is absolutely, in my opinion, wrong.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm on, myself and one other person are on Dyspraxia Foundation board of currently 10. And we are credible voices. I think as long as you recognize you're not on that board just talking about yourself, you can make a real fundamental difference. Even words like, even understanding language, like many people in the dyspraxia community don't like the word sufferer. I would never say I'm a sufferer. And actually those kind of things, even saying direct mail, can be really powerful. And I'm openly an aspiring charity leader. I'm quite open about it because, again, statistics show how difficult it can be for people with a difference to get those top jobs. And so I've always been very open about my ambitions. And actually, only as I look back, I realize me being on the Dyspraxia Foundation board will really help me to some extent in climbing up the ladder. Well, it already has helped me in terms of getting on the IOF convention board and other things. And if we really as a sector want to increase opportunity, then I think we absolutely have to have, people with that difference on our board and really genuinely be walking the walk as well as talking the talk.
Yeah, well, it's a mutually beneficial thing, and that's why fundraisers should join boards, is because the board are very lucky to have you as someone who's a fundraiser and that wealth of experience and access to the convention board and things like that. But yeah, at the same time, you are there to benefit. I think that's a key mutual partnership. In this manifesto for change, I've been reading it, and I'll put a link in the podcast so other people can look at it and sign up to it. There's some interesting things because I kind of laugh at some of these things that start the conversation, because it seems we've been starting the conversation forever, as opposed to actually moving the conversation along. But you've got some practical things that are going to come out of this manifesto, things like a recruitment toolkit and actual training to help people address these issues. You see this manifesto as leading on to very practical things, do you?
I genuinely do. And there are 3 sections to it in terms of the practical things. There's entry, there's progression, and inclusive profession. And I've seen in my work in the disability field over the years, I've seen a lot of diversity type initiatives, documents like this, which really are quite fluffy and complete lack of action. But this absolutely has practical steps. As you mentioned, recruitment toolkit and training. We've already touched on the IOF chart, which is worth reading. We've got Change Collective video. Also, research on the gender imbalance with a view to attracting more men into fundraising. This is the next thing, is something I'm really passionate about, establishing outreach to colleges and universities focused on engaging diverse graduates. And even relate to that, recently I saw the IOF retweet a fundraiser who tweeted about someone from the IOF tweeted about a school or something, had contacted them just asking for stuff to put, like, for a career, fundraising stand in the careers fair. That massively excited me. Even the bigger picture, fundraising having a presence at careers fairs would be a great start. In terms of progression, establishing and supporting affinity networks, and also encouraging the large charities to have their own affinity networks. Access Fund, enabling diverse fundraisers to take part in things. One point I'll make about Fundraisers Convention: before I joined the board, and possibly one of the reasons I was accepted onto a board, I, for 5 years, was a volunteer, one of 50 odd volunteers helping to run Fundraisers Convention each year.
Okay.
And and this is not just me talking myself down. It's pretty true. I've done it for 5 years, and every year, out of however many people were volunteering, I was always the least physically capable volunteer, and that is just
Okay.
true.
Okay.
It was actually being a volunteer. It really struck me the first year. It's actually some of the things, even quite practical, even like scanning people, zapping people in as they're going to sessions. For this personal dyspraxic like myself, that could be a nightmare, and
Okay.
other things too. But the point is, why did I make a point? Yeah, I every year applied to be a volunteer because there was no way that my employer was going to pay. I live in Warrington in the northwest, so I have to get travel as well and accommodation. There was no way my employer was going to pay for me to attend. Now I know of a recent podcast of yours has talked about costs, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But truthfully, even this isn't a criticism as such, but even sometimes IOF discounts, I still think aren't necessarily the most accessible. That's not just unique to IOF. I see it
Yeah.
in other bodies too, in terms of accessibility. So truthfully, I could have paid out of my own pocket, but I wouldn't necessarily want to pay. It would be like a grand, including accommodation. But in reality, unless I paid out of my own pocket, I don't think I'd ever have got to fundraiser convention without being a volunteer. And I applied and got in for 5 years in a row because I genuinely, my persona, I worked hard, and I was always open about my limitations. But I know that if it was just down to physical capabilities,
Sure.
I would be the this person, and that's genuinely true.
Yeah, well, it seems credible that you should be there, and it seems credible that your career should have progressed to the point that you're on the board now. But that's interesting. I mean, it's another area of I suppose diversity and exclusion in that this financial one. People outside of London, smaller organizations, they can't access this training. They can't access a lot of the resources. Sometimes around money. And I wonder, how does the IOF tackle that? How does
Yeah.
the convention
So
board tackle that? Because you're obviously a money making, not a big like profitable company, but you have to pay your bills. So how do we tackle that?
Exactly, and the Access Fund is one step. There's many other things we can do, but the Access Fund is one positive step forward. One other thing in terms of progression, we have a Women into Leadership program too, which is being researched and is being developed to ensure women are represented proportionally at senior levels. That's going back to what we talked about before in terms of female chief executives. Recently, one charity I saw all over Twitter appointed a new senior person, not sure it's chief executive director of fundraising or something, and I saw quite a few tweets saying, oh, it's fantastic to have a female in this job. And
Yeah.
actually I thought to myself, really? I mean, it is fantastic, but it's quite tragic that all these people felt the need to retweet that.
Yeah.
It should be normal.
Yeah, it should be in theory, but it just isn't, is it? And
No.
so yeah, I mean, it's the whole reason these manifesto and this change collectivists need, and it's great to see it actually starting and doing something. And obviously every time we run something like this, it builds on the previous stuff. But it just does seem like stuff is actually moving this time. It does feel like things are changing, and we're seeing. And I don't know. I guess we have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself and the other people involved in the campaign, we can't all do it by ourselves. Everyone needs to get involved. But, myself, I'd be furious if progress wasn't made, tangible outcomes. And I genuinely believe, having got involved in this campaign and, read all about and heard what's planning to do, I genuinely believe this thing will, small steps, gradually help to increase, to improve the quality, diversity, and inclusion in our sector. There's so much to be done. But
Yeah.
having these conversations, I'd really encourage people to sign up to the Manifesto for Change, take part in the survey, and also read the other documents on our website too. Because again, one of the challenges with EDI kind of stuff is it can sometimes, with best will in the world, people say they don't have time for it, but
Yeah.
it's got to be put at the center. So I'm really pleased to be behind this campaign, be involved in this campaign, and I really encourage people to take a look at it and spread the word.
Yeah, so I mean that applies to everyone. Let's talk about these call to actions. So for someone like me, a privileged male that doesn't fall into really any of these categories, except maybe mental health issues and emotional baggage, like what should I be doing? I need to do the survey. I need to sign up. I need to share it and elevate the voices that are behind it. What else can I be doing in over the next year?
And someone like yourself for doing change fundraising and other things, you have your own network, and absolutely it could be a great ambassador for the campaign in that respect. Other things you can be doing, again, I've talked about, I'm really passionate, as are many other people, about leadership, addressing the leadership gap. And I think, as we've talked about before, as people have talked about before in your podcast and other things, fundraisers sometimes, I think, can be too focused on fundraising. I think bigger picture in terms of thinking about governance, operational level too. As fundraisers, we often have to fight with our boards, to get investment, all things, that kind of thing. Likewise, in terms of policies, and lots of organizations I see online, even including in face-to-face world, they don't have equality and diversity policies. And policies, the word policy to some people, I especially know from politics, can seem instantly people think are really boring. But actually, equality and diversity policy, I don't see an excuse not to have it. And I saw one agency recently who had this equality and diversity policy right at the front of their website, and that really pleased me, because so I think even speaking to your stakeholders, getting them to have these policies, or I know myself being a charity director, sometimes just because we're so busy doing other things, policies can be written but aren't necessarily reviewed regularly. Reviewing these policies, taking note of the quite tragic statistics in terms of diversity, that kind of thing, reviewing and updating these policies even at a governance level, I think is really important. There's a saying, leadership comes from the top, and managing upwards is talked about a lot nowadays as well. But policies and all that can be really fundamental in that respect as well. And IOF is genuinely embedding equality, diversity, and inclusion within its governance and its programs, including its largest event, fundraising convention. So at all levels, driving it forward amongst CEOs and trustees and the charity workforce more broadly.
And I think the impression I get is IOF are giving more and more support for people to do, as you say, managing up. I think a big challenge fundraisers are going to face is managing CEOs, managing boards who say, this is a waste of time, this is a waste of money, or this is going to impact negatively on your fundraising and you hitting your target. But actually, the converse is true, isn't it? I mean, diversity is supposed to help your bottom line. It's supposed to be, in a really cynical world, it's supposed to be good for business. And so, they have to embrace it in a financial sense, as well as because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, as mentioned earlier, there's statistically a legal, moral, and business case for having a diverse workforce. And that wordy waffle, that is the truth. And the IOF is going to be working increasingly to develop and champion the case studies of success in relation to these diverse and inclusive teams. Because, again, speaking individually, as someone who aspires to be a charity chief executive one day, I find and I'm someone who does a lot of research in everything I take on, I find very few studies about openly disabled leaders. In fact, even not even necessarily just chief executive, just openly, there might be disabled people who aren't open, but I find very few people like me in that respect. And obviously I'm disabled, but the statistics of BME, 43% according to the Change Collective video, 43% of LGBT fundraisers say they've experienced discrimination. So positive and tangible and credible stories is really important for me, because I've mentioned the inspirational word, and I sometimes have felt, when I've been described as inspirational, as you call yourself, pale, stale, and white male wouldn't necessarily be called inspirational for these things. So real credible case stories of success is really important.
Yeah, that's brilliant. All right. So, I mean, I would encourage people to obviously sign up to all these things, really have a read of them, and I'm going to provide links to them. But you, Jonathan Levy, where do people find out more about you? Because you're great at talking about this, and I suppose people can hopefully follow your lead and, dare I say, be inspired by you putting this out. Where do people find you? Where's the best place?
Yep, I love Twitter. I use it for a range of purposes, including fundraising. My Twitter username is JLevy. That's Levy UK, of course, the United Kingdom. So JLevy UK. They can also find me, Jonathan Levy, on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And I'm really willing to have conversations, whether it's by phone, email, just through social media. I'm really willing to do that. And I'm really willing to do whatever I can to champion this and reach out to people in this respect. I'm genuinely proud to be a fundraiser. I know it's an IOF slogan, but I'm genuinely proud to be a fundraiser. part of the Change Collective, and I'm really willing to have these conversations. And also, debate can be healthy too. So if you disagree with some aspect or want to challenge it, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely great. And you're there to receive these questions, there to receive these criticisms, there to, you know, people who are on the fence or don't want to be part of it. I'd encourage them to get in touch with you and get in touch with the IOF. And you mentioned the Proud Fundraiser there thing, which I'm really excited to see you guys kind of beginning to push a little bit again about this celebrating fundraising as a career. I mean, that's part of the Manifesto for Change, and I'm really excited to see that as I too am a proud fundraiser. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do, and I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely, Simon. That's, I mean, quite sadly, I suppose, the Proud Fundraiser thing's been my Twitter cover photo. It's been my Facebook cover photo for 5 years, which means it's quite sad. But I am really proud to be a fundraiser. I came into it through an advanced apprenticeship. I was basically, to some extent, self-taught, and how things can progress. You know, I still got so much to learn, constantly learning. I want to develop a lot more, but I've gained far more from working in fundraising than I ever expected. And to be able to champion something like disability and other differences now that's really close to my heart is genuinely a real privilege.
Amazing, well done. You don't have any of those Proud Fundraiser stickers, do you? The institute.
Not personally, but I'm sure the IOF may have some.
I'll have to get in touch because I had one on my laptop and I got a new laptop. I need to get some new stickers. So if anyone listening has a big pack of them, please do get in touch.
Absolutely.
All right, Jonathan, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much for opening my eyes a little bit, educating someone as stupid as me, and pointing us all in the right direction. I hope you'll come back on and we can delve a little bit deeper and keep us updated with how this stuff is going, because the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? As we start to talk about it more, let's move beyond starting the conversation and let's actually get it underway.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Simon.
Brilliant, Jonathan. Take care, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You've been listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to changefundraising.com to learn more or get in touch with Simon. Or don't, whatever. You're big enough to make your own decisions.
Hello, this is Morgan Freeman. For discounts on Simon's best-selling online fundraising courses, go to www.changefundraising.com/training and use coupon code podcast. Complete them in your own time, wherever you want. Get busy living or get busy buying.